What's up, everybody? Welcome to Wednesday night. It is Wednesday. It is time for Mythic Conversations. Thank you to everyone who is joining live, everyone who is catching the replay after the fact, everyone who's tuning in for the first time, and certainly everyone who is here every single week. Thank you very much. The weekly Mythic Legions show hosted by myself, Jeremy Gerard. I am the digital marketing manager for Four Horsemen Studios and webmaster at sourcehorseman.com. You can also check me out online if you want to see more of my work. You can certainly follow me on Instagram at Mythic Customs, or you can check out my website. That is www.mythiccustoms.com. Lots of the customs that I show, not the ones I'm showing tonight actually, but a lot of the customs that I've done over the years are all shown on that website, along with recipes and photos and everything. So a lot of good stuff to check out there. We have a pretty fun conversation tonight that I'm looking to get into. But before I do that, like every week, let's start with some Mythic Legions news. And actually, before that, let's start by saying hello. Everyone who's joining in, Super Turtle, thank you. Tony, Duruku, Michael, Drew, Dan, Jennifer, the House Seal family, everybody, Josh, thank you so much. Patrick, Tony, it is great to have you all here. It's great to have everyone tuning in. I can see a number of people that are tuning in now. So again, every single week we start with Mythic Legions news. Obviously, the big news this week continues to be Mythic Legions tactics. So it's crazy how this campaign has just exploded over the last few weeks. This week's been a little bit slower, which makes a lot of sense. Right towards the end of the initial, what we thought was going to be the initial funding period, we certainly saw a flurry of activity right towards the end that pushed the campaign, well over the top. Now that they've extended that, obviously it's a little bit slowed down as people are probably waiting right for the end to, maybe add some last minute pledges. But that all being said, it is now over $175,000. That means that 3 total stretch goals have been opened. 2 different class votes have been opened. So if you go to the website, and let me bring that up here. Got it right here. If you go to mythiclegionsgames.com, everything I'm talking about, you can see it there. They've got all of the listings of the different classes that are going to be voted on, which are super cool. Lots of really interesting classes like bards and samurai and, druids. A lot of really, really cool stuff that certainly I've done as a customizer, but to actually see it in Mythic Legion, see it canon in the realm of Mythos, that's going to be awesome. Additionally, another faction was opened up, and that was the Army of Laodiceus faction, which means that a whole bunch of new characters, new classes, new missions all get opened with that as well. I actually shot a cool video about Mythic Legions tactics. It's funny because I actually shot it. Oh, I got a phone call here. Let me turn that off. I actually shot the video the Saturday that the campaign reached its funding goal. So that was like 2 weeks ago. I shot it in the morning, and it was crazy. That whole day was so nuts. Everything was going so fast that when I shot the video, the campaign was at like 89,000. But by the afternoon, once I had delivered all the videos to the game team, it had actually broken its goal. So in that video, I mean, had I known it would already break its goal, I would have talked even further about that. but certainly it being what it was. But I do talk a bit about, not only the figures, but about the gameplay and the missions, some of the characters you're going to meet in there, classic versions of Gorgo and Otho and Attila. So lots of really, really cool stuff. Once again, mythiclegionsgames.com. If you go there, right on the opening page, the video that I recorded is right there. Thank you very much to the game team for trusting me to convey that information for you. That's really the big news. That's going on for a few more weeks. That's the big news that I can talk about right now. Trust me, I've said it before that 2021 is going to be a big, big year for Four Horsemen Studios. So much cool stuff is coming, and it's coming soon. I cannot wait for it to actually be announced and for us to be starting to talk about it here in this segment of Mythic Conversations. All right, so Daruku is saying, if I made another purchase on crowdfunding, would it be all shipped under one order or two separate? I think what they're going to do is try to combine them all in one for you to make it easier on shipping. The reality is, as we've talked about, is this is the first campaign run at Forge Horsemen. It's a learning process. They did not want to use Kickstarter for this phase. For this phase, this private crowdfunding, they wanted to do that in-house, something that they had a little more control over. There's definitely some improvements that are going to be made to Forge Horsemen along the way. One of the ones that I've certainly seen people ask for is similar to what they do at Kickstarter, where you have the ability to manage your pledge, to move it up or down. This is a little bit different. So once they've charged your card, you really can't change your pledge. That's definitely a little frustrating, but I have heard the game developers say, and they're the ones that are running this campaign, that if you go ahead and, make a separate charge, they're going to do their best to try to consolidate those for you. And Super Turtle saying that's true. Josh saying, how soon? We'll have to wait and see, right? Walter, nice to see you here. Hope you're enjoying your time. So again, that's really the big news. That's kind of what's going on. This has been a little bit of a slow week, but take a breath, breathe it in, because before you know it, the activity is going to get ramped up again. Like I said, a lot of cool stuff coming. It is Mythic Conversations. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the chat there. Thank you to everyone, by the way, that's contacted me this week. Last week's show was the first time that we kind of used the new format for Mythic Conversations, where, I had a little intro, and instead of having the table of toys behind me that I awkwardly would hold up to the camera, I would actually bring those images up on screen. That is going to continue tonight and going forward. I got a lot of great feedback from that. People telling me they really enjoyed that. They really enjoyed getting to see all of the figures in better detail. And certainly that's what we're going to do tonight as well. So tonight's topic, I'm going to get right into it. Who knows how long it's going to take, but it's one I'm really excited about. And it's interesting because it's a customizing topic that I want to talk about. Whole bunch of new customs to show you tonight, including a couple of them that I've never shown anywhere before. But in addition to that, there's just kind of some story aspect to what I want to talk about tonight. A little bit of a history lesson going back to kind of how this whole Mythic Legions customizing started for me and kind of for all of us as a whole. Some of those early days. I know there's a lot of new customizers, a lot of new Mythic Legions fans in the group now. So I want to go back a little bit and kind of do a little bit of a history lesson. And certainly I've got a bit of a challenge for you. I took this challenge that I am calling the All-Stars 3 Challenge. And it's a challenge that I'm going to pose to you, fellow customizers. Maybe this is something that you're going to want to get involved with as well. Okay? So what is the All-Star 3 Challenge? Well, let me talk a little bit about how this all started for me. Last week after the show, like I do most weeks, I started thinking about this week. And I started saying, okay, what topic of conversation do I want to have on the next show, on episode 34? So I came up with an idea, and I actually started doing some prep work for it. I got all my images set. And then over the weekend, I had some time on Saturday, and I was playing around, and I had, some All-Stars 3 figures that had come in. So I started looking at the All-Stars figures, some of the extras that I got, and I was trying to think about what I could do with these figures. And I was looking at the Taurian figure. So Taurian is the Minotaur, the black-skinned Minotaur. Shadow Minotaur was how he was first, when they first actually showed him as part of the Covenant of Shadow wave. His kind of code name, for lack of a better term, was a Shadow Minotaur. That's what they presented it as. Later, we found out that he's actually a named character. His name is Taurian, but his subrace of Minotaur, I guess, would be a Shadow Minotaur. So I was looking at that figure, and I love that figure because it's got all the black skin, the black fur. It lends itself really well to customizing, to painting on top of, because it's almost like I base a lot of things out in black to begin with, and that figure is almost like based out to start. So I was looking at it, and I was thinking, what fun color could I paint this figure? I had recently, or a couple weeks ago at least, done a red one. Right, I had taken a Taurian figure that I had in my collection, and I painted it red as part of my Fury Clan kind of gang. And I've shown that on a previous episode of Mythic Conversations. So I'd already done red. Obviously, Taurian himself is black. We've got Asterion, the Minotaur, that's more like a brownish color. So I landed on green. And I came up with this idea to make a poison Minotaur. If you saw my post today, both on the Mythic Legions Cabal and on my Instagram page, you saw this green-skinned or green-furred Minotaur that I called Toxinian. So he's a poison Minotaur. And I actually got the idea for that character based on another Covenant of Shadows figure. So the green bone skeleton of Scaphoid, when that one was first shown, it was listed as poison skeleton. So I got it in my head. I said, you know what? I'm going to make a poison Minotaur. But rather than just taking that Minotaur, because Taurian's got that like blue armor, that didn't work for me. I was like, the blue armor doesn't make sense for a poison Minotaur. But then I looked at Malleus, and Malleus has, the cool greenish color on his chest armor. He's got the dark colored, kind of weathered looking, gauntlets and lower feet and like lower leg armor. I liked that combination. So I said, it would be really cool if I combined parts from Taurian with parts from Malleus. And also would allow me to use an armored chest as opposed to the bearskin chest like the other Minotaurs have. And this process started, the gears moving. It started me thinking about this, because then I said, well, if I do that, I'm going to end up with this, this blue armor from Taurian. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to end up with these bones from Malleus. What am I going to do with that? And before you knew it, I was starting to pull apart all of these figures. And I was having so much fun. I was having more fun kind of popping apart these figures and customizing than, quite frankly, I'd had in a while. And I think part of it was it started to feel very nostalgic to me. And what I mean by that is, for those who are newer to Mythic Legions customizing, the time that we are, living in right now, that we are customizing in, is absolutely glorious. We've got, 100 and some odd different Mythic Legions figures that have come out. The 3D companies are putting out amazing, amazing products all the time. I mean, it's at a point where almost anything that you could want to make, the parts are available for it. And if they're not available yet, they're probably coming soon from one of the 3D companies. That is amazing. But I got to tell you, back when I think about starting Mythic Legions customizing, when I first got Mythic Legions 1.0, there wasn't, almost 200 Mythic Legions figures to use parts of from that library. There was just that 1.0 wave. There were no 3D companies creating all these parts. You could use parts from other action figures like Masters of the Universe Classics. But even that came really after for me. when I talk to a lot of the customizers that were around since the beginning, people like Nikki Nicole Cheney, like Dennis Derby even, when we got started, we were using Mythic Legions parts. That's what we did. And it makes me remember something that I've long said. Who is the best Mythic Legions customizer out there? Four Horsemen Studios. That is who is the best. Because if you look at what they've done with this line and the way they've reused this parts library, it's essentially customizing. They're taking these existing parts, they're combining them in new ways, they're treating them with different paint decorations to create these whole new characters. They essentially are customizing, and they do it wonderfully well. And the other thing I always say is, what are the best parts to use for Mythic Legions customizing? That's a no-brainer. As much as I love all the 3D companies, and heck, I'm directly involved with two of them, both Wolf King Customs and now LegionShop.com. But I will tell you, the best parts to use for Mythic Legions customizing are Mythic Legions parts. They are wonderful because they go together. You know they're going to fit. You know they're the right aesthetic. Building out these figures, messing around, playing, dare I say, with these toys this past weekend was so much fun that it made me come up with not only a new idea for tonight's show, but this thing that I'm calling the All-Stars 3 Challenge. So let's get to it. What is the All-Stars 3 Challenge? What I wanted to do was see if I could take the All-Stars 3 figures and create all new characters using only the parts that were in those boxes. Now, I can paint them, I can alter them, I can, cut them apart. I can do whatever I want to alter those parts, but I cannot use any parts from other Mythic Legions figures that were not part of All-Stars 3, nor can I use any other, toy lines like Lord of the Rings, nor can I use any 3D printed parts. Only All-Stars 3 figures. And what I started to do, now remember, I've started already. I've already got the idea to combine parts of Taurian and Malleus to create my poison Minotaur. What I ended up deciding to do, let's take a look here. I ended up deciding to take all 5 figures. So these 5 figures, now All-Stars 3 is obviously a 7-figure wave, but the 2 figures that are missing from this photo are Darina, which is a female 2.0 style figure. So the only thing I really could have done with that is repaint that itself, because it's not going to really mix and match with any of these other figures. And the same thing goes for the Stone Troll 2. Those 2 figures kind of being the outliers, I put them aside, but I grabbed these 5 figures. And these are Baron Volgar, Taurian the Minotaur, Malleus the Skeleton, Lord Dragool, and then, of course, the blue-skinned demon Zazar. I took these 5, and my goal for the All-Stars 3 Challenge was to find a way to use only these 5 figures to create 5 brand new characters. That's it. That's the All-Stars 3 Challenge. So what did I come up with? Well, again, I had an absolute blast. And it really did bring me back to those early days of customizing. Getting nostalgic, trust me, I love where we are today. I love the variety we have. I love all the parts that we can use. But limiting myself to just these 5 figures was such a cool challenge. And for me, part of it is because I go back to, my work and my history as a designer. Being a designer for many, many years, it's funny when I talk to non-designers, a lot of people, they assume that when a client would say to me, oh, I have no ideas, just you have a blank slate, do whatever you want. They would assume that's actually, a lot of fun or that's enjoyable. It's not. It's horrible. Constraints make better designs. When you have total blue sky, when you can do anything you want, it's actually a lot harder, I find, and many designers find, to focus. When you know there's certain restrictions and you have to work within those set of restrictions, it eliminates some of the possibilities and it forces you to be creative within those constraints. I love designing that way. And this is exactly what the All-Stars 3 challenge was. So the first thing that I did, obviously, was I got some hot water and I popped these things apart. So this is what I had on my kitchen counter Saturday morning. I've got a pile for Taurian, a pile for Dragul, Malleus, Volgar, and Zazar. I pulled all these parts, separated them all so I could start making my characters out of them. And right out of the gate, remember, I did know I wanted to do the Poison Minotaur, and I knew that I had some other ideas, but this is how it started for me. So I said that I shared the first one today, the Poison Minotaur, Toxinian. Let's look at that character now. Just got to find him in my list. Here he is. So this was the character that I created. And again, I wanted to go with that green body. And the Taurian figure is such a great figure to do this with. I think I heard someone call this one a Minotaur because it's almost like a Minotaur and an orc combined. And it's funny, I didn't even think to use an orc body when I first started thinking of this character, even before I thought about the All-Stars 3 challenge. My brain didn't even go to green skin means an orc. I just created this character. Like I said, I wanted to use the Malleus Armor. I did add a little bit of additional detail to that armor. So the Malleus Armor has that greenish color on the torso itself and on the neck guard, but that greenish kind of color is not carried through anywhere else on the armor. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to put a little bit of that color on some of the shoulder pads. You can see it, the photo here that's closer up of the face. You can see that a little bit on his shoulder there. And I did some on his knee pads as well and a little bit on his gauntlets. I'll look at some other pictures in a moment. You might be able to see it a little bit better. But what I did for this was I painted the horns black. I dry brushed that green onto the skin. Mina is saying, love the eye color on that. Thank you very, very much. Oh, that was not the one I meant to put up there. Meant to put this one there. Another comment came in right before I shared it. But let me bring that comment back up because it's a relevant question. Do you prime before painting on legions? I do not prime ever. Occasionally, especially when I'm doing 3D parts, I will spray paint those with like a base coat, oftentimes a black base coat, unless like a lot of my critters that I do, I'll spray the base coat of that I actually want the fur color to be. So for instance, my foxes, I will spray paint with orange to begin with, but I never use primer. And in the case of this character here, I just painted right on top of the figure itself. So I did that. Now the feet on this are actually from the Zazar figure. So the Zazar figure, the blue skin demon, I used those hooves on this figure, not the Taurian hooves, only because I had a plan for the Taurian armor, for that blue armor. I had a plan for that and the hooves. So rather than using those hooves and painting them, I left those as is. I used the hooves from Zazar. I did paint the armor on top just with a black. I just painted some black on it, did a little bit of dry brushing to try to match it to the rest of the armor here. Let's look at another picture. Got a couple of shots of each of these that I'm going to be able to share. Hopefully give you a couple different angles. So this one here, you can see that on the shoulder, you can see that little bit of green, kind of that piece that flares out a little bit. That's one of the spots that I added that additional green paint to try to match what you see on the torso itself. Same thing on the knees. I added that just to try to add a little bit more color into this character to create this Poison Minotaur. On that note, I have this photo to share as well. That'll be helpful because I know a lot of people ask for specific paint colors. So I've got this photo that I'm going to share. This photo actually shows all the paint colors that I used during the All-Stars 3 challenge. Took one photo so you can see all of it. I just mentioned that I painted the tops of those hooves, the armor black. Any black would do for that. I happen to use my Vallejo black. But once that was done, I did a little bit of dry brushing with that Craft Smart tin color. That's what I use when I tried out, when I black base with a little bit of dry brush of that tin. That's always what I use when I try to get that kind of damaged metal look. I actually just realized there is a paint color that's not represented here, the yellow that I painted on the Minotaur's eyes. I forgot to shoot that, but that's just a standard yellow. What's actually more important probably in this photo is that paint all the way to the end, the festive green metallic by Deco Art. That is the color that I used to match the paint, the armor color on Malleus. Now, it's not a perfect match, but it's close enough. And what I found was, because I wasn't trying to actually, the armor parts in the chest piece that I'm kind of matching it to don't touch exactly the parts that I painted. So the fact that they're a little separate from each other means that if the two shades are not perfect, it still looks okay at a glance. Let's look at that one more time. There we go. So once again, really easy recipe on this, because that's the other part of the challenge that I want to do as well. When I did this All-Stars 3 challenge, I didn't want to create totally crazy designs that would be very, very hard to achieve. I wanted to show how just some simple combinations, some simple paint applications could make 5 totally different figures from the All-Stars 3 wave. And it also was kind of, kicking it old school, I guess you could say, going back to the kinds of customs I often would do. This Poison Minotaur is very, very indicative of the types of customs that I started with. Using Mythic Legions parts, creating a fresh new character, minimal paint apps, but what I like to imagine as smart paint applications. I really, really love customs that use a great use of parts, smart paint applications to create something totally new, totally unique. And I think that this hits on all those points. Now, that being said, I do like to kick it up a notch and go a little bit more extreme. So, little sneak peek at the end, I'm going to actually show you what Toxinian really looks like in my collection. Because that photo there, as much as I dig it, it got great feedback today, both on the Cabal and on my Instagram page. However, after it was done and I took these photos for tonight's show, I did add a little bit of extra to them just to finish it up in my eyes. But we'll get there, right? We'll get there. Tony's saying, do you know if there will be paint swatches in the game for our created characters? Paint swatches, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. I know there's going to be a lot of variation in terms of being able to change armor color and skin color and all things like that. So that's going to be represented. I don't know if it's going to be actual paint app, like if it's going to be paint swatches, where you're going to be able to match it to certain kinds of paints. That I would not expect. But you are going to have a ton of color customization options for your characters. What I've been told is the digital figure creator or the digital character creator is going to be pretty robust. That alone is going to be a pretty awesome aspect of this game. Okay. Figure number 2. So now I've got my Poison Minotaur and I'm looking at my remaining parts. And the first thing I look at are that blue armor that I got from Taurian. It's such distinctive looking armor that I needed to figure out a good way to use that. So I'm like, well, what can I do with this armor? And my first thought is, let me do kind of a cold weather character. I love doing cold weather characters, right? I love doing frost goblins and tundra orcs and all those, frost demony type characters. So I'm thinking, and I'm like, well, blue and blue. I've also got the Zazar figure. Now, the Zazar figure, I've certainly, used that as, the demon Zazar. I've turned that into a genie type character before. But based on the parts I have here, what am I going to do with it? So I decided to keep him a demon, but make him a frost demon, pairing the Zazar body parts with that blue armor. This is what I ended up coming up with for figure number 2 in the All-Stars 3 challenge. So I took this figure, which again is the Zazar body, and I literally swapped out all of the Taurian armor. This includes the lower legs and the feet, the hooves. Remember, I just told you there was a reason why I didn't use Taurian's hooves in my Minotaur custom, because I wanted to keep them here. The shoulder armor, the gauntlets, the loin piece, and the waist piece, all of that go into this custom. Once I had it all together, I did a couple things. I painted the eyes, instead of the red that were in the eyes, I painted the eyes with a glossy black color. So the way that I do that is I painted it with black, and then I actually have a little bit of this liquid gloss that I put right on top of it. I actually did a video here on my channel a while back in my short customizing tutorial videos kind of series called How Do You Get That Wet Look on Figures. And it's great for making eyes glossy or teeth glossy or tongues, any, open mouth characters it works wonderfully with. You can check that video out if you want more information about that, but that's what I did on his eyes here. And then obviously I took some white and I did some dry brushing over his whole body to get that snowy type effect. His weapon is actually the staff from Taurian, that bluish type staff. But what I did for the top, instead of using the normal magic topper, I actually took the little skull piece that comes with Lord Dragool. So Lord Dragool comes with the axe, the kind of the axe that came originally with like a Goblin Legion builder, and it has that removable little skull piece that pops on top of it. The one for Lord Dragool is painted very much to look similar to the imp character that, from Hordak, because Lord Dragool is obviously a Hordak tribute figure. So I took that, I painted that to match the actual staff so I could give it a new look, to give him a new weapon. Let's look at another set of the Frost Demon pictures. And this is another one that, little sneak, this is another one that I did add some more to after the fact. But for now, what we're seeing here is these are the initial All-Stars 3 challenge looks I did. Nothing you see on this figure comes from anywhere other than the All-Stars 3 wave. And this one is super, super simple. All this is very largely a kit bash. Now, if you've heard me talk before, I don't use the word kit bash very often. I think a lot of people use the term kit bash almost as not a negative, but a lesser kind of term. Like, oh, if you're just combining parts from figures and you're not actually altering them in any way, that's a kit bash, not a custom. To me, it's all customizing. You're having fun. You're creating new things. I've never felt the need to, put a lesser kind of term on any of the art. However, certainly this is a simpler type of version. So if you'd want to call it a kit bash, I'm fine with that too. But what that is combining all of the armor parts from Taurian the Minotaur, the blue pieces, the blue body pieces from Zazar the Demon, a little bit of paint on his eyes, a little bit of dry brushing over the whole figure to get that icy type effect, and you've got your Frost Demon. And this guy looks great. I have him positioned with a bunch of my other Frost characters, some of my Frost elves and my Frost dwarf standing right in front of my big, gigantic ice troll. Yeah, Tony's saying ice demon, that works as well. So there we go, 2 figures down. And as I'm working on this, again, I'm having a ton of fun. I'm really, really enjoying this. And the reason I decided to call it a challenge, and I said I'll challenge, my viewers, challenge the people that are doing this, is I think doing something like this, especially if you do a lot of customizing. I think if you do a lot of customizing and, you've got that kind of spool of unpainted heads waiting to go, and you're at the point where you're like, I have so many more heads than bodies. Doing something like this where you're forcing yourself to just use existing figures, or you're forcing yourself into some limitations, the amount of creativity that it fueled, I was so fired up this weekend working on this, like I said, in a way that frankly I haven't been in quite a while. It made me totally change the topic of this week's conversation because I wanted to do this. I was actually, when I first started it, I was thinking, oh, I'll still do the original topic this week and I'll do this All-Stars 3 challenge next week. But I couldn't put the figures down. I did all of these customs on Saturday, actually. I did all the customs on Saturday, shot all the photography on Sunday. And once I had that all done, I said, you know what? This is it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it this week. Okay, so now I found a way. I've got my Poison Minotaur. I've got my Frost Demon. I found a way to use the blue armor from Taurian. I found a way to use that blue skin demon. The next piece that I decided to put together is one that I've seen a couple other people do versions of, right? So I've seen a few people take the Lord Dragool figure, who once again, that's the kind of Hordak tribute. And he's got the very distinctive blue limbs, the blue upper legs, the blue, upper arms. I've seen them take that character and swap out those limbs for fully armored parts to create a fully armored character. I really, really like the way that looks. It's got the black and red scheme. So that's what I decided to go with. Now, additionally, remember, I'm trying to think about storylines for these characters. How do they fit? What type of character am I making? I'm not just combining these figures randomly. I am trying to create distinct characters. You see a distinct character in that Poison Minotaur, Toxinian. You see a distinct character in that Frost Demon. So thinking about the types of characters I have in my displays, I've got a whole display of Fury Clan characters. Fury Clan orcs, obviously, Fury Clan elves, goblins, mind flayers, Minotaur. I've got a ton of Fury Clan characters. What about a Fury Clan knight? So with that in mind, this is what I decided to do. Very, very easy figure as well. Not a lot of paint or anything on this figure. All that this figure is these are the head, torso, neck piece, pauldrons, pretty much all the armor pieces, lower legs from Lord Dragool. It already has those red kind of stripes on the lower legs that adds even more red to it. So all I did here was I used the upper arms and the upper legs from the Baron Volgar figure. So that's the only fully armored figure in this wave. So if I wanted a fully armored character, I needed to leverage those parts. The upper legs of Baron Volgar do have a little bit of purple paint, so I painted those red. And then I used the loin piece. The Lord Dragool figure comes with kind of like that fur type loin piece. And not only did I not want to use that for this character, I wanted to change it up a little bit more. There was already not a lot of customization being done on this figure, so I wanted to add a little bit something different. So what I did here was I used the loin piece from Zazar. Now that's actually an orange loin piece, so I painted that red. So the only customization, the only paint on this figure is the red of that loin piece and the red on those upper legs. Really, really simple, but I show this as an example of when I hear people say, oh, I'm afraid to start customizing. I'm afraid that it's not going to look good. You can do really fun combinations, really cool looking combinations with a minimum amount of work. It does not have to be these incredibly complex designs. It's really, it can certainly be intimidating when you look at, for instance, an unpainted 3D printed head, like especially like a human-like head, a dwarf head or something. And you think about, how am I going to paint that? That can feel overwhelming. But when you look at a character like this, how easy it is to put together, what I hope is that people don't feel overwhelmed. They realize that, you know what, this is not that difficult. I can do a little bit of work and get some really, really cool results. Because I'll let you in on the secret, this is how it starts. These types of little combinations, swapping heads, swapping armor, little bit of paint applications. These are really simple paint applications. You know, a little bit of red on his upper legs, painting that loin piece red. Just take it slow. You don't want to glop the paint on. Take it slow. A couple thin coats are going to do so much better for you than one thick glopped on coat. With that little bit of work, you can get something really cool. Let's look at a couple more pictures. So hopefully everyone's digging the All-Stars 3 challenge so far. Something a little bit different than we've done in past weeks, certainly, but hopefully giving you some inspiration, and hopefully, you know, I did it for All-Stars 3. As soon as I was done this, I was looking at the Aerothere figures, and I was like, ooh, Aerothere is going to be coming pretty soon. Maybe I'll do the Aerothere Wave Challenge. We'll see. For now, we're still talking about All-Stars 3 Challenge. But here's a couple more examples. I did use the cape that comes with Lord Dragul as well. That cape, actually, it's interesting. That cape goes on differently than a lot of the other capes. That cape, it actually has, you know, the 4 holes in it that we've come to expect. But what you can do with that is you can put the 2 middle holes under the pauldrons, and the 2 holes at the ends of the cape, you can actually put that either pop the wrists through them, or even pop the gauntlets, like, you know, pop the gauntlet off, put that little hole on the peg for the lower arm, and then put on the gauntlet. And it creates more like a bat-like looking cape. For this one here, I wanted to kind of bring it under the pauldrons and around, so it kind of hung over the shoulders a little bit, over the arms, I should say, a little bit, under the pauldrons, over the arms, to create this additional bit of red for the character. Okay. The next one is one I'm actually pretty pumped on. So I got to tell you, the Poison Minotaur is probably my favorite figure in this series, but a close second is this next one here. So I'm looking at my remaining parts, right? And now I've got a pile of parts that are getting smaller and smaller. Obviously, I still have my bones. So the bones from the Malleus figure, which is one of the first 2 figures I pulled apart to make the Poison Minotaur, I still have those. So I've got to do a skeleton of some kind. I've also got the purple armor that comes from Zazar, which is really, really distinctive looking. And I've got a handful of pieces from Baron Volgar. So I'm looking at these, and this is how my design mind works. You know, I'm starting to, even from the beginning, starting to try to put things together. What colors go together? How can I make cohesive characters with a minimum amount of paint? After all, Lazy Boy Customizer LBC, that's what I'm trying to do here. Cool looking stuff, minimal amount of work. Okay. I don't know what that comment means, but thank you. So I'm looking at the bones, I'm looking at the purple armor, and I'm looking at the torso piece for Baron Volgar that's got purple. So purple and purple. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do an undead vampire. Fair enough, right? So I combine the bones, I combine, you know, the head, the skeleton head, the torso, the armor. I do all that, and I realize that it's not really a vampire. It's just a skeleton wearing the purple armor. The most distinctive aspect of a skeleton are its teeth. So I'm looking at this Malleus figure. Now, the funny thing about the Malleus head sculpture, that's the head sculpture that has the movable jaw. Malleus was actually the first time we got that head sculpture all the way back in 1.0. It's sculpted to be missing a tooth. So what I decided to do was get my X-Acto blade, because remember, I said I'm not using other parts, but I can paint and modify these parts. I decided to slice out the other tooth on the corresponding side of Malleus's head. So he was missing 2 teeth. And then what did I do? Well, let's take a look. So this is the character I created. This is my undead vampire. And those teeth are toothpicks. The toothpicks, amazingly, are the exact color of Malleus's face, of Malleus's teeth. Those 2 pieces of toothpick are not painted at all. As is, they were a perfect match for Malleus. They look like they belong there. So all I did, one of the teeth was already missing. I cut out the other tooth. I took some toothpicks, very carefully used my X-Acto blade to slice off a little tiny piece. Then I put a dab of super glue on, put that super glue up on the actual, in those little gaps, and just held it there for a second. And I created this vampire skeleton. One other fun thing I did here was, you'll notice the loin piece that you can see on the full figure. As I was working on this, I actually saw Zombie 13 post a kind of an Undead Templar figure in the Mythic Legions Cabal. He's done a number of Undead Templars in the past. I've done a number in the past as well. One of the things I love to do is to slice up the loin piece. So when I make it dirty, it also looks kind of torn up. But the way that I slice it normally and the way that I saw him slice it on Saturday were very, very different. I loved what he did with the very kind of, angular, the very sharp looking cuts at the bottom of the loin piece. So I copied that. I even commented on his post and said, dude, I'm totally stealing that. I copied that, but ultimately that's almost the only thing done on this figure. It is the Xazar armor, all the purple Xazar armor. It is the work that I just did on the vampire's teeth, which again is just cutting out one tooth and gluing those toothpicks in, and then slicing up that loin piece. The only other part I did here are the feet. So the feet that I am using here are the Baron Volgar feet. The Baron Volgar feet are, obviously like a more blackish color. So what I did was I painted those a purple to match. Let's look at that picture of the paint again. So this Deco Art Metallics Amethyst, that is the color that I use to match the purple armor on Xazar. Again, is it 100% perfect? It is not. But the thing you have to remember is the paints that the factory uses. And I've actually had people ask me this question: what paints does the factory use? They are not paints that we have access to. We cannot buy these paints anywhere in the US to use them. It is not a standard. They're not using Citadel or Vallejo or anything like that. It is a totally different kind of paints. We cannot get them. So what we have to do is get as close as we possibly can. This one here, this Deco Art Metallic Amethyst, is the one that I chose to use in this case. So let's look at a couple more pictures of that vampire. And you can see here, I've got a shot of, the side view so you can see how it looks. But that jaw is still totally articulated. And the way the teeth actually are glued in, they hang over the lower jaw. So you can still use that jaw. You can still close that figure's mouth if you want to. Chris, thank you very much, saying the Toxic Minotaur and the Dead Vampire figures are my favorite. I would have to agree. Those are my two favorites as well. Everything you are seeing tonight, by the way, I will be sharing on my account, on my Instagram, and on the Cabal over the course of the rest of the week. But by joining in tonight, whether you're joining in live or whether you're catching the replay, you get a little bit of a sneak peek. Patrick, thank you very much. Says, absolutely love that vampire. Definitely need to make one. It's, again, super, super easy. Everything I am showing tonight is so incredibly easy for you to make. So Mina's got a really good question here. They all look so sick. What factions would you place each of these customs? So that's a really, really good question to ask. Working backwards, I would place this character in Alithia's Brood. It's either really that, probably, or Congregation of Necronominus. But I imagine this as a vampire who's maybe been slain and has been reanimated in some way, but he's still very much a member of Alithia's Brood. Thinking about that Fury Clan Knight, probably Legion of Aether. That's where I would put that character. The Frost Demon, let me think. The Frost Demon, you know what? I'm going to say that the Frost Demon is part of Xylona's flock because he doesn't have to be a bad character. The All-Stars 3-wave is very, very evil heavy, very, very villain character heavy. But I'm going to actually buck a trend a little bit there, and I'm going to say that Frost Demon is actually a heroic character. I actually have a Frost King that I created that I've shown on the show before that was based on a book I read called, it was by an author named Catherine Arden. The series is called the Midwinter Trilogy. The first book is The Bear and the Nightingale, and there's a character in that's based on an old Russian folktale. The character is called Mrzoko, the Winter Demon, or the Lord of Winter. And in the book, they refer to him as a Winter Demon all the time, and he's got different appearances. Realistically, when I created that Frost Demon, I imagined it as an alternate look for my Winter King Mrzoko. So I'm going to put him in the heroic faction of Xylona's flock, which leaves Toxinian. I'm going to probably put Toxinian in the circle of Poxus. I mean, he's toxic, he's poisonous. Poxus, pestilence, feels like it goes well together there. Chris saying, can I see the Frost Demon? I came in late. Absolutely, I can show that again. So there you go. That was the Frost Demon that I showed earlier in the broadcast using the Zazar body and the Taurian armor. So thanks for the question. That's where I personally would put all of those, the factions that I would put all of those characters in. Let's see a question here. So, as a newer fan to the line, how many people make their own factions, groups, etc. to add to the mythology? I think a lot of people do that. I know that I've certainly done that. I know that when I display my characters, I take the official lore into account. So it certainly influences what I do, but I've used this as an example many, many times. In my mythology, in my collection, all the dwarves are together. They're all good characters. They're all heroic characters. Even though officially the dwarves are incredibly, incredibly varied. We talked about that last week, right? On that Mythic Conversations. The dwarves are incredibly varied. King Bromden is part of the Legion of Erethyr. He's an evil character, a villainous character. I like to keep them all together, but on top of that, I don't know that I've created factions for myself, but I certainly have created new areas that I like to say are just outside of the map of Mythos. If you look at the map of Mythos and there's all those spots there, the 4 heroic kingdoms, right in the middle, you've got the castle of 4 sides. Then there's all the evil type areas where those factions reside. I like to imagine that there's lands outside of what we've seen. And that's where I like to set a lot of my characters. I have one, for instance, that I talk about all the time, or I've used many times, called Hazard of Sana, which is a translation for Arabian Nights, 1001 Nights. It's the name of the book in certain translations. And for me, that is my land of genies and Ifrit and all those types of characters. King Solomon. It's actually a whole land that I'm going to explore soon in one of the series coming up from Wolf King Customs, the Secrets of the Lamp series that I kind of teased recently. Let's see. Durku saying, what is the Cabal? So it's actually Cabal with a C, C-A-B-L. The Mythic Legions Cabal is a Facebook group that is the official fan group of Mythic Legions. It's a wonderful place. That's where a lot of people that really are passionate about the line, that's where a lot of them meet and, share their love of the line. Great, great people. I know there are certainly some people that don't use Facebook, and that's a completely legitimate reason. There's certainly an argument to be made about why you may not want to use social media in certain cases or not use Facebook. But to answer your question, that is the Cabal. It is a Facebook group that is pretty much the dominant Facebook community, the dominant fan community at this point for Mythic Legions. There's a number of other Facebook groups as well dedicated to Mythic Legions that are also wonderful places for additional conversation, marketplace and stuff like that. Let's see. Yeah, so Joe had a good thing referring to the comments I was saying about paints. Think of factory paints as industrial chemicals in various colors. Yeah, they're not things that we're going to have access to here in the U.S. because, frankly, they just would not pass safety inspections. Okay, so back to the challenge. 4 figures in, that means I've got 1 left. And what do I have left? I've got a bunch of spare parts, because that's inevitably what's going to happen here, right? If you do any kind of challenge like this, and you could do this beyond just All-Stars 3. I did All-Stars 3 because I just got them in and I had them in hand. For those, I know All-Stars 3 are still shipping to people. I know a lot of the retailers are just getting them in now and shipping theirs out. So if you don't have yours in hand yet, hopefully they'll be on their way soon. You could do this with other waves as well. I mean, there are still lots of figures from older waves, from Advent of Decay, for instance, on some of the retailers. You could do this with other waves as well. You could do it with future waves as also. But whatever's going to happen, if you decide that I'm going to take 3 figures and make 3 unique customs, or 5 figures like I did, or 20 figures, you're going to end up towards the end of this challenge with a pile of spare parts. That's what I ended up with. So I'm looking at this pile of spare parts and I'm thinking, okay, I've got the blue limb pieces from Lord Dragul. I've got the head from Baron Volgar. I've got the black torso from Taurian. I've just got a mismatch of parts here that I've got to figure out how to use. So what I decided to do was to embrace that concept of spare parts and almost create kind of like I don't want to use the word Frankenstein, but basically a cobbled together type of brutish character. Maybe like a flesh demon-y type character if you want to go there. With the blue limbs, the one thing I knew I didn't want to do another Frost character. And because at first I thought about that. First I said, you know what? Maybe I'll make like a minion, like a frost minion for my frost demon. But it felt, with only 5 figures that I'm doing here, kind of going to that same well for 2 figures felt a little lazy. So I wanted something different. So this is what I came up with for my spare parts character, which, considering the fact that it's the last one that I had left, I still think came out pretty darn cool for a spare parts character. So this character, as you can see, I mentioned he has the Taurian chest, which is normally black. I've actually seen a number of people do this, like paint those torsos. I've seen them do it actually with some of the Mercurian, like Spartan-like characters, where they take one of those torsos and they paint it to look like armor. And I've always thought it was a really, really cool look. I didn't want this figure to just be wearing, just have a black chest. So I painted that with some silver dry brushing to make it look more like armor. I obviously used the blue limbs that I told you about. He's got the lower arms and lower legs from Baron Volgar. I actually mentioned incorrectly on the last one. I said that I used Baron Volgar's feet for the vampire skeleton. Those were actually Malleus's feet that I used, because I had taken Malleus's feet off to put hooves on for the poison skeleton. So this has got the Baron Volgar head, shoulder armor, lower legs, lower arms. He's got the axe that came with Lord Dragul. And then I also gave him Lord Dragul's shield, but I painted over the red color. And I used a couple of the chest straps to make it look kind of like that thing was like strapped to his arm. I wanted it to look less like a shield and more just like a giant blade weapon that he had basically lashed to his arm that he could just do some crazy, crazy damage with. Let's look at another one. Last couple photos I have here. A couple side views so you can see how that shield looks there. But again, this was designed from the spare parts. That being said, I think it came out pretty cool for the spare parts. I mean, realistically, I only had 2 options. He either gets this head or he gets the vampire kind of head that came with Lord Dragul, because Lord Dragul was the only one of these 5 figures that came with 2 heads. Most of the other figures, a lot of figures these days come with alternate heads. I mean, realistically, almost every figure recently has come with one up until the Alithia wave. The Alithia wave, because it has so many unique new parts in it, they decided not to put alternate heads. But previously, a lot of figures did. Not in Mythic Legions 1.0, though. In Mythic Legions 1.0, extra heads was more of an aberration. So because a lot of the figures in this wave are from, they're all-stars from early waves, like 1.0 and Covenant of Shadows, they didn't have a lot of alternate heads. Lord Dragul is the only one. So realistically, the only head that I did not use in this challenge is that Lord Dragul vampire-like head. That's it. 5 figures, 5 unique combinations for these characters. Tristan saying, I like how you put the straps on the shield. Yeah, again, trying to use the parts. I looked at the pile of pieces I had and I said, how can I use these? How can I do something a little bit different? Even something simple like that, strapping those on, I think that really helps. I'll tell you, I think that the straps that the figures come with are one of the easiest ways to change up the look of some characters. It's funny because back in Mythic Legions 1.0, if you want the story of those belts, the only figure that was originally shown with a belt was, I believe, Attila Leosair. So they showed Attila with that belt around his chest. And I remember at the time people freaking out saying like, oh my goodness, that's such a cool accessory. I wish more figures came with it. So it was a really cheap thing to add. So the Horsemen decided to add a belt with every single figure. Since 1.0, we now have gotten figures that come with multiple belts, which is really, really nice, because I know that early on in my customizing, I could not get enough belts. I absolutely loved them. I mean, first off, and I've heard the horsemen agree with this, any figure that has shoulder pauldrons that doesn't have full armor, that's just got a chest, should have belts. They should have belts across their chest, because how else would those shoulder pauldrons be held on? I guess you could say there's a strap that goes underneath the like underneath their armpit, that you're not seeing the way they're posed, but that seems wildly uncomfortable and like it's just going to fall off. Realistically, like the barbarian builder, that figure, if you're going to put pauldrons on that bare chest, it really feels like it should have those straps, right? So I loved doing that early on, but you can get really creative with those straps. You can like crisscross them. You know, you can put multiple on, you know, put one going left, one going right, one going left, one going right. If you do that and you get this kind of like cross pattern, that looks really, really cool. I've done that on a number of figures. Get the cross pattern and then start to separate it a little bit, and you end up having like gaps in it, and it totally changes the look of that figure. Really, really simple stuff. You can put two off one, you know, one strap, one coming down, one a little bit askew. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. And like you just saw there, you can do something different with it to strap on the shield or something like that. I even did one when I did my Boba Fett type tribute. On the shoulder armor, I put one of the skulls from the Goblin Legion Builder axe, and I actually used one of the straps to make it look like that skull was lashed on to that armor, almost like Mad Max style. Yes, Anthony's saying, magic strapless pauldrons hold them in place. +2 for adhesion. So that is what I did with my All-Stars 3 challenge. And once again, I take it up on you. Anybody, I challenge you, do something similar. Grab a couple of these figures. You don't have to do all 5. Grab a few of these figures and try to combine them in new ways and share it. Share it and show me, show others what you can come up with. Trust me, it is a ton of fun. But I don't want to stop there, because as much fun as this challenge was, as much fun as it was to go back and remember how it felt to customize these figures in the early days when all we really had were the Mythic Legions figures, and the only thing we could really do was swap the parts and paint the parts. The reality is we're not there anymore. The reality is we do have access to so many other cool things, so many other cool figures. And even just adding a little bit extra to these figures, to the figures I did in my challenge, can transform them even more, can take them to the next level. So with that in mind, after I was done my challenge and I photographed them all and got them ready for tonight, I sat down and I started looking at them and started saying, okay, what else would I add to this? If I hadn't restricted myself the way that I did, what would I do next? And again, I think that's also a useful design exercise. Limit yourself to create something that's really, really focused, that's really, really sharp. But once you've got that, say, okay, if I was going to stretch a little bit, if I was going to add a little bit extra, what would I add? This is what I did. So let's bring up that Poison Minotaur one more time so you can get another look at it. We can remind ourselves what it looks like. So this is the one I showed earlier. This is the Poison Minotaur. Once again, only using parts from All-Stars 3. Pretty simple paint applications. Just a little bit of dry brushing on there. Only one color. Painted the horns black. Those horns do come off, by the way. And a lot of people ask this. You've probably seen, I've even done it, where I've used some of the other horn helmet attachments in there. They don't fit. The other horns from like the big black horns that you see on a lot of the helmets, they don't fit in this head as is. You can get them to fit, but you have to Dremel the holes in the head to get them to fit, and then you're probably going to end up gluing them in place. That being said, these smaller horns do just pop right out. I popped them out, painted them black, dry brushed the skin and fur parts of the Minotaur, a little bit of color on the armor here to create this character. But that's not my final version. Here is the final version of Toxinian, the Minotaur. So you can see very little additional done here, but those little changes I think add a lot. So the only other part I added to him is that green cape from an elf ranger. I took that green cape, I shredded it up, and I hung it under just one pauldron. So instead of giving him like, a full-on cape off his whole back, I kind of went to like the Boba Fett route where he's just hanging off one shoulder. I always like that look. I think it adds a lot because it just hangs down one side and it creates a really interesting profile for the character. So shredded that up, added some paint to it, put some holes in it. Speaking of holes, I also cut a couple holes using a drill and an X-Acto blade in his loin piece there. And I added some brighter green some brighter green paint to that loin piece to make it look almost like, a toxic acid style effect. I used that same color green on his hooves. I added a little bit on his face because previously his face was all one kind of color green. So I added a little bit more there and I added a ton of it to the axe. Let's look at another picture there. Another picture of the axe. So what I did, you can see a close-up of the face there where you can see some of the different green around the nose. It's not over the top. It's pretty subtle. But when you actually look at it, it's got more dimension to it instead of just being one color. And then I went a little crazy on the axe. I wanted the axe to look like it was just totally drenched in poison. And if you read the little write-up I wrote on this character today, allow me to read it to you. It says, Toxinian the Fowl's veins flow with deadly poisons. One drop of his blood, saliva, sweat, or phlegm is enough to kill most other living creatures. This makes it quite difficult to fight this beast, for if a swing from his mighty poison-bladed axe does not kill you, simply being in his presence could be toxic enough to do you in. So that's the fun little bio I wrote for this character today, and I wanted to represent that poison-bladed axe. So all I did was use a bunch of different greens, a couple different mixes, added some yellows into the green to get a couple different looks. And what I did here was really take the brush and kind of dab it. So not dry brushing, but really using the tips of that brush to dab it. Almost the way, if you've ever watched Bob Ross paint his happy little trees, the way he kind of dabs that fan brush to create the leaves of those pine trees, that is the effect I used on this axe. And yes, as I was doing it, I did feel very much like Bob Ross. Saying he's like a Dark Souls character. Not a game that I play. I'm not a gamer, but my son's really into it. So I'll ask him. Maybe he'll tell me, yeah, definitely. Pete, thank you very much. Nice to have you here. So those are the 5 figures I did. Now, I did upgrade a couple of the others as well. I don't have those photos to share tonight, but stay tuned. Like I said, all this week, you all got a sneak peek at everything I'm going to show this week. But all this week, I'm going to show the other figures in my All-Stars 3 challenge. And then probably next week, I'll show the upgraded Minotaur and, the others that I've done as well. But once again, really, really simple customs. These are not difficult things. Anybody who's watching this show, whether you are seasoned customized or whether you are brand new, I'm guaranteeing you can execute on these customs. They're really, really easy. So let's go through them one more time. We just looked at the Minotaur, but I'll show him again. So we've got the Poison Minotaur. parts from Taurian, parts from Malleus. The feet on this one are from the Zazar. Only work done is painting the tops of those feet, painting the skin and the fur of that head to that green color, yellow eyes, black horns, a little bit of paint details. The next one we did was the Frost Demon, which includes the Zazar body and the armor from Taurian. The staff is made from Taurian staff with that little skull topper piece from the Lord Dragool weapon. All I did here was paint the eyes on the head and add some dry brushing on the body to get that kind of snowy type effect. Then we have the Fury Clan Knight. Find him. So the Fury Clan Knight is actually one of the least amount of work of any of these customs. This uses a number of parts, the head, armor parts from the Lord Dragool figure. All I did was use the upper arms and upper legs from Baron Volgar and the loin piece from Zazar. I painted that loin piece red along with the little detail on the upper leg armor to get this to be a totally black and red character. Looks great alongside the other Fury Clan characters that I have in my display. Then, definitely a favorite. I cannot wait to share this one in a few days. The Vampire Skeleton. So this one, once again, uses the bones from Malleus. I cut out the tooth that was opposite his already missing tooth. I glued some points from some toothpicks in there to create this fanged skeleton look. Shredded up the bottom of his loin piece, which came from Baron Volgar. And then I used the feet from Malleus and just painted those with a little dry brushing of that purple amethyst colored paint to match the rest of the armor here and create this undead bloodsucker. Or undead. I guess all bloodsuckers are undead, right? I should say skeletal bloodsucker. And last but not least, my spare parts custom. This kind of brutish looking character. I imagine him as being kind of a reanimated, almost Frankenstein-like character that carries out his master's bidding, wields an axe in one hand and has this giant bladed shield-like weapon lashed to his arm for the other. And there we have it. That is my answer to the All-Stars 3 challenge. What's yours? Awesome. Very, very cool. We've got some time left, so I'm going to check back some comments here. While I'm checking the comments, if anyone has anything else they want to ask or share, hit me up. We've got some time. Oh, you know what? Someone just said Poison Blood, certainly an enemy of Alithia. I was just thinking, I didn't say what faction the spare parts character would go in. So let me think. Spare parts. I want to say Legion of Erether again. But maybe, I don't know, maybe Congregation of Necronominus. Maybe those are all skeletons. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Where would he fit? Patrick's saying, definitely need a Malleus figure now. Happy little axe. Yes. So Michael's saying, can you show the demon staff up close with the imp head on it? Let me see if I can. I might be able to zoom in on that when I share it. So that's about the most I can get. There we go. So how's that? There you go. So you can see there we've got the tip of the staff, and that's just got the little peg that you would normally have the topper, the magic staff topper go on top of. All I did is underneath that little skull, there's a little opening that's made to go on top of the axe. I just popped that right on top of the staff instead. There we go. Thank you very much, Greg. Very impressed with this week's video. Looking forward to you attempting to top this next week. I'm up for the challenge. We'll see what I can do. Thank you very much. So Pete's saying that he would be Red Star. You know, Red Star is my favorite faction. Part of me wanted to put him there, but I left him out because he's my least favorite of these 5. Sorry, buddy. I mean, you are spare parts. You are. Someone has to be my least favorite. It's you. And Red Star is my favorite. So I tend to reserve the Red Star faction for just my favorite characters. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've mentioned this before that when I would play Dungeons and Dragons as a kid, I was always a rogue, you know, always a thief type character. So that whole mercenary, roguish type characters that Sons of the Red Star seem to resonate with, it seems to make sense with that faction. I really like that. We've seen so little in that faction. I'm really hoping that we're going to get more characters in that faction. It's fun. I really like the Splinter factions. I know a lot of people's favorite faction is the House of the Noble Bear. But I think that the House of the Noble Bear and the Sons of the Red Star, the reason I think those factions are so interesting is because they are Splinter factions. They're so varied. They can be so varied. You know, if you look at House of the Noble Bear, you've got the barbarians and females, and you've got dwarves in there. You've got a wide variety of characters. Heck, Brontis, the arena troll, is from that faction. There's a nice variety of characters. Some of the other factions, like certainly Congregation of Necronominus, if you don't like skeletons, you're probably not going to like that faction. It's all skeletons. Irithyr has a little bit of variety in it, but those are my 2 picks, House of the Noble Bear and even better, Sons of the Red Star. Awesome. So Patrick's saying, is there any prep you should be doing before painting a 3D printed head? Patrick, if you check back on my playlists on my channel, there's a playlist called Short Customizing Tutorial Videos. There's one video that's all about using 3D printed parts. To answer you succinctly here, all that I would do, I personally don't clean them. I know there are other people that do. You can, look at them if they have any supports. Most of the time, they don't come with any little nubs. If there are, you can just pop those off. Some people scrub them clean. I don't do that. I just paint them with a base color and I go to town. But if you want more detailed on that answer, check out that video about using 3D printed parts. That's a good point. Tony's saying the spare parts guy could be Kronaw's brother. So Kronaw, that particular character that's a little mismatched as well, they talk about him being almost like brought to life through an unholy, combination of magic and science. So spare parts guy could be part of that same group. That's a good call. I like that a lot. So any other questions, or are we going to call it an evening? Let's check. Let's see what Mythic Legions Tactics is up to as of right now. So it has now crossed the $176,000 mark. Once again, this is available at mythiclegionsgames.com. You can check that out. 5 days to go on that. So there's still some time to back that. I would love personally to see this get to 200,000. Not only will that unlock that will unlock House of the Noble Bear. I'd love it to get to 250. If it gets to 250, we actually get a fan-voted faction that gets opened, which that would be awesome. But even if it just gets to 200, doubling the initial funding goal would be awesome. It actually means that it's that much less that they have to get in the next campaign. And it also means the game is guaranteed to come with that much more stuff. We've already gotten the Army of Leosir that's been opened. That opens up a ton of new characters, classes, and missions. If we can get to Noble Bear, same thing happens. Tons of new characters, classes, and missions. Plus, we're going to get the new classes that we get to vote on to bring into Mythic Legions. So really, really cool. 5 days left on that. See what else we got here. Otherwise, let me bring up a couple more of the website addresses that I always do. I said at the top of the show, but I'll repeat it here. If you want to check out the work that I post on an almost daily basis, you can do that on my Instagram page. That's at Mythic Customs. Also, my website, www.mythiccustoms.com. One more thing. I know a number of you have signed up to be a subscriber at Legions Shop. So legionsshop.com, that is the storefront that Joe Viteri and myself, Lord Veterus himself, are putting together. I've been talking about that last few weeks. We actually sent an email out yesterday to everyone who subscribed, letting you see a sneak peek at some of the stuff we had coming. So there was some stuff in that email that we have not shown publicly anywhere else. So if you want to be first to see the stuff from Legion's Shop, please, that's what you want to do over here. Sorry. Oh, there we go. Legion Shop. Go to legionsshop.com. You can register for the newsletter so you can be updated when cool things happen. Certainly you can, follow me on my accounts as well. Follow me in the Cabal. I will be sharing at least some of this stuff, not all of it, because I'm not directly involved with all the products, but I will be sharing what I can. So check that out as well. Let's see, a couple questions. In the game, when the factions are opened, does that mean more of the story related to those factions are revealed, like new areas, characters, etc.? Yes. So when they've said that they've got a whole bunch of story planned, right? When these new factions get opened, there's additional chapters of the story. There's additional missions that get opened, additional characters that get added. So by opening up the Army of Leodicius, that opens up a whole bunch of characters from that type of universe, from that faction. It opens up additional classes. It opens up additional storyline and mission. That's one of the things that I talk about in the update video I did for Mythic Legions Tactics. I know people love when I talk about Mythic Legions lore. If you're into the story and you're clamoring for more story, for official story to go to fill in the blanks on the bios that we have on the packages, this game is for you. I mean, even just that aspect of it, all of the pivotal battles, the pivotal events that are part of Mythic Legions, those are going to be represented in this game. And the more that gets opened, the more of that story gets unveiled. So very, very cool. Yes, Tony, the more that gets opened, the more story and characters, etc. we get. So I know goblins had lots of love already, but do you think there will be more cosmic goblins? I think it's fair to say that we'll see goblins again. The goblins are, without a doubt, some of the best-selling figures in the line. In fact, the best-selling figure ever in the line remains the Goblin Legion Builder. Goblins are super, super popular. Will we see them again? I think it's fair to say that they haven't gone away forever. Will we see cosmic goblins? Who knows? I will say that I think that a lot of people, when they think about cosmic, they're thinking about like Mythic Legions in space. So they're thinking space orcs or, Atlas in space, things like that, space pirates, all very, very cool things. But what they have said all along is this is not just Mythic Legions, in another timeline, Mythic Legions in space. This is going to be a whole new universe, a whole new set of races, a whole new set of characters. When you see these character designs, you are not immediately going to say, oh, I see what they did there. They took the parts from Urza and they moved them and they did this and they added a bubble helmet. No, you're going to look at these and say, wow, that is totally a completely different type of design, but these parts are going to be interchangeable. So we are going to be able to make space orcs and space goblins if that's what we choose. But will we see them officially in the line? I think that's limiting us too much to trying to take Mythic and translate it into a new property. They're going to do something way cooler. Mythic Legions should have an anime. I mean, the game, I've said this before, the game is the first step, hopefully, in expanding Mythic Legions into new markets. I would love to see some other types of entertainment properties to help convey that story as well, for sure. With that, I think we're going to call it a week. Thank you all for joining once again. We will be back here next week, as my friend Drew likes to say. Same Mythic time, same Mythic channel. Until then, I look forward to that conversation.